Okay, hello everybody. I'm going to give you a little webinar about the academic profile for those of you who couldn't make the workshop or just want to have a refreshment. So on this screen you see the way that we define academic data. On this side of the screen you have the IB, which includes the full IB diploma, but also any course certificates that you're taking, IB exams. That would include any partial IB students. You also have our letter grade system, which is here, our GPAs, which is here, then also testing data. EACT, SAT are just two examples of testing you can do, but also testing for world universities, such as for medical school, you might have specialized tests that you have to take, or for European universities, you might have university-based tests. So this all represents your academic data. Here you see we have a transcript. Your transcript is a US document, but you can use this document to apply to many world universities. If you see, you have letter grades here. We have all of your classes starting from ninth grade. And down here you have a GPA number. So you can see that we have all the course names and levels of the courses that you took. We have semester grades are reported as part of your transcript, and we have an unweighted cumulative GPA. That means they're only classes you took at NITO count towards your NITO GPA. We do not take classes from things that you did outside of NITO. And we also have an unweighted system, which basically means in our system, PE counts as much as biology SL. They all count the same and towards our same NITO GPA. So just taking a look at that transcript, especially if this is the first time you've seen a transcript. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how different world universities view this transcript. So particularly how the USA looks at this document, how do they review the transcript, and we're going to review these things here: rigor, grades, trends, not GPA. So what will we mean by rigor? Well, that means how hard the classes that you take. If you take the full IB diploma, those are some of our hardest classes we have here at NITO. Taking the full diploma as well is a very rigorous coursework, but also taking a partial diploma where you have some HL and SL courses is also a element of rigor. Basically means that US universities look at how hard the classes you're taking compared to your classmates. It's an important distinction in the US system that they do what's called an intra-class comparison. That means in the US, they're comparing you to all the other students from NITO who are applying to that university. So if you apply to Boston University, for example, and there's 10 other students that also apply to Boston University, the Boston University will look at how hard the classes are and make a determination on how hard your classes are compared to your classmates, rather than compared to the rest of the world. They don't really compare it in that way. So that's rigor, judging how hard the classes you took versus how everyone else at NITO takes classes. The next thing is they look at is grades. That means the ratio of A's to B's to C's. This transcript doesn't have any D's, and they're just looking for how many A's, B's, and C's you have and in what courses. For example, if you have a C in concert choir but all A's in every other core subject, that may be interesting to them because in your rigorous classes you're getting very good grades, and maybe you had a slip up in a class that was an elective. So that's how they look at the grade trends. Remember, for the US, everything counts from semester grades 9 through 12. They also look at trends, so they see whether or not you're upward trending or downward trending. Take a moment to look to see if this student is upward trending or downward trending. So if you didn't have anything come to mind, this student is largely upward trending. You see down here lots of C's in first semester, ninth grade, And then by the time second semester, 12th grade comes around, they got all A's and B's. Also, it seems to me like second semester, 11th grade, they got almost all A's, just two B's. So we would call this an upward trending student. So if you look at the cursor for a second, right, students can go on an upward trending line, right, a downward trending line, or pretty much a straight line, meaning they always get the same grades. So universities in the US are looking for trends. Now, what do we mean about not GPA? Not GPA means that largely the US will look at this number and put it in the context of NITO, but there's no magic number in the US that means you're either in or out. Because largely schools in the US do what's called an intra-school comparison, meaning comparing you to the other students, it's really not about getting a magic number for the GPA for the US. It's much more about how difficult those courses you took, what sort of grades you got in those classes, and the trends on your transcript. If a lot of students think that it all comes down to your GPA number, well, that can give you a little indication about whether or not your fit for the academic profile is right. It largely won't determine whether or not you're in or out of a US university. So we're just going to take another example of how the UK reviews the transcript. The UK largely draws the line in 11th grade. They're not looking at 10th grade or 9th grade. So those of you who did not so well in 9th grade and 10th grade, good for you. The UK could be to your advantage. And the UK actually does look at your cumulative GPA. This number is actually very important for them. So kind of the opposite of the US in that way. And the reason is because the UK is doing a world comparison. So they're not comparing you to other NITO students per se. They are comparing you to the rest of the world. So when they compare our students to the rest of the world, we actually look quite good compared to the rest of the world. And for example, if we use the same example, Boston University, if 10 students apply to Boston University, they may take 2. But if 10 students who are qualified apply to University of Edinburgh, for example, in the UK, they could take all 10. That's because the world has this idea that if you meet certain kind of magic numbers, or we call parameters, then you have a much higher chance of getting into that school. We actually have what's called an 80-0 rule. That means you either have a 0% chance of getting into world universities, meaning you're non-qualified. Like, for example, if a university said you can get in with a 3.4, this person with a 3.39 would not have a chance. They would have a 0% probability of getting into that school. On the other hand, if you had the number, the magic number that you needed for world universities, our students have about an 80% chance of getting in. Very different from the US in terms of that 80-20 rule. Nothing like that exists in the US system. The US has much of a mystery about who gets in and who doesn't. This is really the idea that in the US, they're looking for your soul to match the soul of the university. And they really care about that fit of the student and also within context in your class. But the world university system, UK particularly, we're talking about here, doesn't really do that. They're looking more in the context of the whole world and seeing if you're a good fit for their school. So that's how the UK reviews the transcript. Once again, just drawing the line here at 11th grade and actually really caring about the GPA. So sort of the opposite of the US. How do Canadian universities do it? And also Dutch universities. Dutch and Canadian universities are very similar in how they look at the transcript. And a lot of Canadian and Dutch universities will draw the line at 10th grade, where they don't so much look at 9th grade, but they do look at 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. They're looking at it in a similar way of the US with rigor, what classes you took, how difficult they were, but they're much more wanting to judge how you did based on what courses you took to be qualified for university. So the idea that if you apply to engineering or business in a Dutch university or a Canadian university, they're going to look for those science-based classes for engineering that you need, or those math-based classes for business if they require it. Now, largely in Canada, they do something called a recalculation of your GPA. All Canadian universities do this. They have something called the internal science average. So if you're looking at Canadian universities, they're going to take all your grades in math and science courses from grade 10 and 11 and also 12. First semester 12th grade counts there for Canada. And they're going to recalculate this number down here based on some formula that they have. We generally know it's about a simple average, so you can look at what your internal science average is if you're applying to engineering or any science-based career in a Canadian university. You should check that out. The Netherlands doesn't do an internal science average or something like that, but they do have an eye if you're looking to go into sciences at a Dutch university college, which are most popular here at NITO in terms of the Netherlands Dutch university colleges. Then they're going to expect that you have better grades in science classes than you do in humanities classes. They look at the transcript now in Canada and the Netherlands. If a lot of students think that, oh, the IB is what gets you into Dutch universities, or the IB is what gets you into Canadian universities, yes, while that may be true in some cases, most of the time, it's about a 50-50 balance between your in-class grades, that means what you see here, and your IB grades. For you partial diploma students, they're also looking at your predicted grades for any course exams that you take, so that's also an important part of your academic picture. There's about a 50-50 balance between any exams you're going to take for Dutch universities or Canadian universities and your in-class grades, which is your transcript that you see here. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how counselors can use the transcript to predict the IB grades in a course. Basically, what we'd like to see is when you predict yourself, whether you're predicting a partial IB course or you're predicting yourself for a full IB diploma, you're going to look at two different methods. One we call the micro method and one we call the macro method. So starting off in the macro method, this is the big picture method. You can take your exams and your quarter 3 grades in your PowerSchool, and by using the grade conversion chart for the IB that you find in every single classroom, you can see that what a 75 comes out to be in terms of an IB grade. This is a very general way of doing it. Taking your exam grade that you just got in December and looking at your quarter 3 grade that you just got from your report card, averaging those two grades together, then look up on the conversion chart what that is. Remember, these conversion charts are in every single classroom. The conversion in terms of the percentage grade to a grade on the IB is the same for every class, but you'll notice that in between they have grade descriptors, and of course the grade descriptors are different. What you can get on Physics HL for a 7, the grade descriptor for that is very different from the grade descriptor for Lang and Lit for a 7, for example. So that's a macro method, taking your exam 1 that you just got, your quarter 3 grade, and then just simple averaging together and using the conversion chart, IB conversion chart posted in every single classroom to see más o menos what it is that you get for your IB prediction. How do you do the more micro method? The more micro method is actually clicking into your semester grade and also looking at your quarter 3 grade and still using your exam 1, but only taking IB assessments out of the data. So you're not averaging the whole Q3 grade, you're only averaging what was accounted as an IB assessment. You also, in this case, can include your semester 1 grade in the micro method, meaning that you're going to click in there and look at what for quarter 1 and quarter 2 counted for an IB assessment. Now, this can be more accurate, but for some students, particularly students that do well on exams for IB assessments but do not do their homework, you may have a little bit of a rude awakening when you get your predicted grades, because teachers look at homework and other indicators, what we call indicators of progress. That means your participation in Harkness discussions, any presentations that you had. These are things that are part of class, part of your in-class grade, not directly related to the IB, but a lot of teachers feel like they're good indicators of your progress towards the IB. So if you're a student that has really good exam grades, but your homework grades are really horrible, that's something to take into consideration for sure. It doesn't happen that often, honestly. The students that don't do their homework frequently don't get, sixes and sevens. It does happen, but it's something you want to take into consideration. So this is micro and macro method. Remember the micro method, just looking at exam 1 and quarter 3 and doing a simple average. The more macro method is clicking into your semester grades and also your Q3 grades and only taking out what counted for IB assessments. I had a good question at the seminar about how do we do predicted grades for TOK and extended essay. You have, if you don't have the chart, you just Google, TOK and EE point matrix. It'll come right up. You'll see that those A's and A's through E's are going to be translated into a number that can represent your bonus points. This is only applied for full IB diploma students. Partial IB diploma students don't have this part. So just for full IB students. And full IB students wanted to know, roundabout where they're at. Our extended essay average is, in terms of extended essay TOK, those taken together, we have an average of a 1.8. So if you want to be a little conservative, giving yourself 1 point is pretty fine. Giving yourself 2 points, especially if you feel like you're really strong. I told the group too that I have a good method, actually a pretty good method that can determine, how many bonus points you're going to get. If you're doing a science-based extended essay and you're having a really hard time finding your topic or designing your experiment, that's going to likely be a 1 point, especially if you don't know where you stand right now. I said my standard question to ask students is, how's your extended essay going? And if they give me kind of like a frowny face with a, ooh, mister, oh, I don't know, that's a 1 point answer, maybe even a 0 point answer, right? But if you're really know what you're doing, you're meeting with your extended essay advisor, you're going to tell me a lot more about it, really happy face. I ask you, how's your extended essay going? You're like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm meeting with my advisor. I have this awesome experiment. Maybe then you want to give yourself 2 points. We will have extended essay advisors and TOK give their own impression of your, your predicted grades for those for full IB diploma students. Once again, if you're a partial IB diploma student, those don't apply to you. Here I'm just showing you once again the grade prediction conversion chart like you talked about. So once again, whether you're doing the micro method or the macro method, you're going to look up, do a simple average, either of your E1, Q3, or clicking in and looking at your Q1, Q2, Q3, and exam 1, how that all fits in. And then you just look at what the simple average is of those things. And let's say you got an 84. You say, okay, that's about a 5. And then you can read what it is that you're supposed to do. This just happens to be a group 1 studies of Lang and Lit descriptor. Once again, the numbers are all the same in terms of conversion, but the descriptors change based on the class. You have access to this right here, or you also have access to the full one, which is like the 1 through 7 in every classroom. So just go a little bit about the predicted grades process, which also can apply to partial diploma students. We give everyone who has a prediction for any grade who's planning on taking an exam, we give them a prediction. So mid-June, right after you guys go away for vacation, we do predicted grades. Once your E2, exam 2 in June is done, just in a couple weeks now, you'll get actually official predictions from your teachers. As it says here, these are not sent to universities. They're usually used as a guide to narrow down university lists, but we don't give those to you until you come back at the end of July. When you come back at the end of July, we're going to give you some of your predicted grades. Then we have between July and September to finalize those predicted grades, particularly for anyone applying to early application systems, particularly UK Medicine or Oxford and Cambridge in the UK. Some other programs around the world may have early, and that would largely be meaning your grades are going to be closed right here before DSCHO break. And you see here, predicted grades are provided to universities for admissions purposes. Therefore, at the DSCHO break, teachers will update the predicted grades, and the university list will be further tweaked. And then basically your university prediction happens right as we go into DSCHO break. So then for all the students, your grades are then made firm before October 1st. Oh, I'm going to go back for 1 second. So then October starts what we call the show me months. It would be really nice if NITO students were on a trend line, like I said, straight up, always getting better. But it tends to actually look more like this mountain. You get a good grade one day, the next day not so good. And then you get a better grade, and then not so good. And then so you kind of go up and down between 6s, 5s, and maybe even some 4s. So what do you do about that? Well, if you are applying to a university, let's just use the same university example, like University of Edinburgh, for example, very popular school. Most courses at University of Edinburgh require you to have a 32 to a 34 total point score with a 6.65 at HL or 6.55 at HL. So if you're applying to a program and you don't have that, it doesn't mean that you can't apply to that university, but it means you're going to have to enter in what we call the show me months. That means you and your teacher are going to meet with a school counselor and Mr. Suplee, where we look at a plan for you to try and increase your predicted grade. Now, we don't necessarily think that you should come in thinking, I need this predicted grade. We want you to make sure that the target is appropriate for you and you're close, but you just need one grade to be increased. If you're looking at trying to apply to Edinburgh with a 34 at 6.65 and you have a 5.44, that really means that the school is not a good fit for you. We would not suggest that you apply to that school because largely you have a 0% chance of getting in with those applied grades. And the show me months are really for students that are on the line between like a 5.6 and 1 HL subject, or maybe a 5.6 and 2 subjects, 1 SL, 1 HL. And you need a little bit more time to show us that you're capable. That's why we call them the show me months. So show me months then run all the way to December, where at December, it's done. December, we draw the line and what your grades are or what your grades are at that point for any application that is due between December 1st and February when we come back, which would usually be the February 22nd, 23rd, something like that. Just so everyone knows, we are on pause from December 1st until we come back in February. The reason is that we have to process all the applications for the school, and so we will not allow any more show me month prediction happening after December 1st. Honestly, the departments will decide. The math department last year decided to make one exam period right before December 1st where everyone came in on a Saturday, and that was it. Once you did that, that was your predicted grade was. So each department's going to kind of decide how they run this with Mr. Suplee's support, but the idea is that if you're trying to increase your predicted grade going from October to December is going to be the final time we do it. We'd actually like to see you doing it more in November, but some students need the whole 2-month period of time or 3-month period of time for the show me months. Some students don't, and it's really up to the teacher, the student, the counselor, and Mr. Suplee to decide what the plan is and when that predicted grade has been achieved in terms of your performance. Because remember, we could just give everyone a perfect 45 and no one could get into school, but we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that our predicted grades match our outcome. This is also a process for partial students, especially partial students that we're going to share your exam results, predicted grades with your universities. So anybody who has this as part of their application will also go through this process. Then we send out final university predicted grades to all universities by December 1st, no matter what. And then March, we do another process called the IB predicted grades or IBIS predicted grades. Those are sent to IB, but they are not sent to university, just so you know. And then May, you actually take the exams. And July, your final IB grades are sent to university. Anywhere we have a conditional offer, which many conditional offers can come from anywhere in Europe or also Canada. These are hard conditional offers. That means if you don't get them, you're likely not to attend. The US also has an idea now of wanting you to be in the range of your predicted score. That means really no more than 3 points below prediction, although they really more competitive they are. They want you to get what you predicted or higher. So the idea of, oh, I don't have to worry about my exams because I'm applying to this country or that country, it doesn't really exist anymore if you've told them that the IB is a route for you. So what's next in terms of your academic profile? You are going to, when you watch this webinar, you're going to have to do our homework. Part of your homework is going to be reviewing your own transcript. You're going to be able to get a copy of your own transcript, an unofficial copy, and do some of the exercises we talked about today using this slideshow as well. You're also going to complete a Google form for a self-estimate IB predicted grade, even for some partial students. And that's going to connect to your university research. We basically want you to know whether or not you're going to be in the right range fit for your school or not. And how do you do that? Well, it depends on what universities you're looking at and where in the world you're looking at. But for the US, you want to see if your SAT, ACT, pre-ACT is within the 50% range band for the school. So when you look up a school, in the US, they always quote what their 50%, what 50% of their applicants got on their SAT or ACT. You're looking at that score with the GPA. Even though we already told you GPA for USA isn't really the number you're looking for, it's really in the USA, it's the only real way you can tell whether or not you're in the range of that school or not. And if you're not in the range for that school, let's try and find schools that you're in the range for. It's a little easier for world universities. Frequently, they'll tell you what exactly total IB points you need to get in the school, or what GPA exactly you need to get into the school or have a good chance of getting into the school. Once again, thinking about that 80-0 rule. So if you're looking at world universities, you're going to just look up what their IB total point score is, or if you're a partial student, what their SAT, ACT score is with GPA. Largely for partial students, many systems in the world, you're actually not going to go based on your certificates. You'll probably go based on an SAT or ACT if you're a partial IB diploma student, plus your GPA. Your certificates will be extra. They'll be on top of your GPA and your SAT or ACT score. So we want you to look up those universities that you're already considering, you're already thinking about, your dream schools, your fit schools, and your safer options, and seeing whether they actually are achievable dreams, whether they're a good fit for you, and if you have any safer choices on your list. So go ahead and do that. Do the homework. We're going to send it out to you shortly. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. And we're going to be continuing doing our seminar series, so make sure that you come.